Are we here?
Not yet. Okay, good to go.
Connecting. We're here, I think.
Okay. Hello, everybody.
Okay.
For folks who are in the Pacific time zone, good morning. It's 9 a.m. For folks across the world, hello, whatever time zone you're in. I'm Ethan Eisman. I lead design at Slack, and I'm here with Jess Clark.
Hi, I'm Jess Clark. I'm the head of design at Calendly.
Great. Well, thank you. Somebody said, love your glasses. That's a nice compliment. Thanks a lot. It makes me feel really good this morning.
Oh, you're going to read the chat and do this at the same time. I'm impressed. Okay.
So today we're going to be chatting about Jess's journey and the lessons that she's learned along the way. And so I'll be asking questions of Jess, and we'll see where the conversation takes us. It might be a very clear linear path. It might meander. We'll see how it goes. So to start everybody off, or to start us off, first question is, Jess, can you share a bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I started by going to a local state university. I went to school for graphic design. First it was journalism, then advertising, then graphic design. I think we've all gone on a little bit of a journey to get to where we were. And then I actually graduated and was going to school during the last recession. So it was really hard to find jobs. I was applying to a bunch of different jobs, heard a response from no one. And so one of the jobs that I ended up getting was a temp front desk reception job. So the job was basically going to a bunch of different Silicon Valley companies. And whenever the receptionist was sick, I would be on the job. So I learned the job of all these different companies. And one of those was LinkedIn. Even though back then it was not a household name, most people didn't know how to pronounce it and didn't know about it. And there I actually met the head of design at the time, and we got to talking, and he asked to see my portfolio, asked what I was going to school for, showed it to him. He gave me feedback. I worked on it all night. And then from there, he actually offered me an internship, and I was able to join LinkedIn as the first design intern with a big group of engineering interns, which was a really fun experience. And from there, a decade of learning and impact, a bunch of different roles going from brand and marketing to product design. And then I was ready for my next step. And a few months ago, left to join Calendly as the head of design.
Wow, that's amazing. What an incredible journey. I mean, it's a great opportunity that the head of design provided. Was there even a design internship like formalized, or was it sort of like, hey?
No, it was really, let's make it happen. It was really informal. I think at the time, I was really trying to make anything work. You know, when there's not a lot of jobs on the market, I was helping everyone in the organization. So people on the marketing team, I was creating signs for like security needed a sign for like the fire alarm. So as I'm on the front desk, I'm like creating signs for the fire alarm and like posting those on the door. So I was just doing everything I could to get involved, and the people were really amazing there. I could tell it was a really great place to work. And so when we struck up a conversation, we're talking about it, and he offered the opportunity, I was like, okay, this is a big risk because I have a secure job with an hourly pay. And really this was like a 3-month internship. And if it didn't work, I would be on the job market again. So it was a risk, but I could tell that the people there were really worth it, and the company was building something great. And yeah, from there, having the opportunity to work with a ton of really senior folks, because the team was really small. I think at the time, LinkedIn was like 800 people, which is now, I think, well over 19,000 people.
Wow.
And so to be able to just jump in to that environment and work with really senior people on really cool stuff, I always recommend to people that that's a really great place to start your career. And I was really grateful that the opportunity was there when it wasn't formalized.
That's great. Just one thing to call out here is that, oftentimes when we look at, people's success, it's like, oh, maybe that person was, lucky, or maybe that person worked really hard. Sometimes it's actually a combination of both. It's like, doing really hard work up front, kind of like taking on any projects, even doing like the signs in the office, you put in the work there. And then it was like luck that kind of turned out. But you were also kind of temping across different companies too. So you're kind of creating a network there to a certain degree. So there was some like strategy behind the luck too.
Yes. I had a college professor, my freshman year, journalism professor, and he said, like, always look out for the open doors. And so I think at the time when I was at the front desk, I was like doing everything I could to like see what doors were open with all the departments, to see if there's a job there, and like I said, all the different companies. So I think like if another opportunity came up, I could have ended up in a totally different place.
Right.
So like you said, it's like working hard, and then the luck of like you can't always choose which doors open, but you can choose to step through them. And so that's what it is.
Very cool. So what things have you done throughout your career that have helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that I did early in my career that still totally apply today. The first one is invest in personal growth. I'm a big fan of feedback. I think if you are open to receiving feedback, you act on that feedback, you will see growth exponential. Especially if you're looking at like your industry and your peers. Being open to feedback is a really really amazing skill set to have. And so really early on, I asked after every presentation, after every hard conversation, every time I delivered work, like, how could I be better? Like I said, I was in an environment with a bunch of senior folks. It can be hard to ask sometimes, but it's a lot easier to ask than for someone to give it to you when you didn't ask, I will
Mhm.
say. And so if you want to be in a place where you're ready to grow and you want to be in a place where it's easier to receive hard feedback to challenge you, just asking for it really sets the stage. So I think first, really investing in that. From there, later on in my career, like today, I work with career coaches. If there's something specific like communication or how to manage my energy, what motivates me and what's the right work environment for me. So you can work with career coaches if you have specific things that sometimes it's just really hard to make progress on your own. And so that's really great. I think another thing is aligning yourself to impact. So if really knowing and understanding the business that you're working in, whatever that business is, and understanding how your work directly applies to it, one, that helps you be motivated because you know why you're making a difference where you are. But also, it really helps you make a case for promotion or for other opportunities in your organization. So not everyone has access to, being in the room and understanding really where your company is going, especially if you're just starting out. But you have access to things like company all hands or other team meetings. And so I think when you're in a company all hands, really pay attention and really ask yourself, do I understand how my work aligns to that? And if I don't, ask people, ask your peers, ask your manager, ask other people across the organization, and that could be really helpful for your own growth and motivation and promotability and other opportunities. And then giving back. I think giving back is a huge piece of it. We're all in the same community. We all can help each other out and find different roles. One thing I noticed when I started out in this industry is like when you go to college, or even if you didn't go to school for this, you have no idea what kind of roles are in this industry. Like I never saw myself when I graduated college as being like leading a design system. Like I didn't know what a design system was. And honestly, I don't even know if a design system existed at the time. So I think making sure to give back and build a community, there's lots of ways to do that. Just being a sounding board for your peer, or being an advocate for someone if they're looking to get promoted, or coaching and mentoring, like on ADPList. It's an amazing platform to put yourself out there, coach other people. You always have something to give, even if you're a year in. You have something to give to someone who's just starting out. And so, as you're getting mentored, I just recommend that people give back and mentor other people too.
That's great. So what I'm hearing here is first is being open to feedback, actually like asking for feedback, being very proactive about feedback.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
second one that's helped you is really being curious about the
Mm-hmm.
business and being able to not just focus and speak to the design, but also understand the business that you're working within, because most of us are working in for-profit companies,
Yeah.
and even if
Yeah.
it's a nonprofit, like there's still the business model that's important to understand, and you can bring that in. It just makes the experience that you provide much more relevant to folks. And then the last one I'm hearing here is like giving back and really
Mm-hmm.
being supportive and sort of like creating a culture of learning for other people and helping support other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, so how did you decide to shift from being a designer to then taking on the next step as a design manager?
Yeah, so I just decided to try it. It was not a forever thing for me. I was really lucky. I was in an environment at LinkedIn where they have an IC track and a management track, and some companies have that, some companies don't. So it's always good to learn about your company and what opportunities there are. And so at the time, I had just come back from maternity leave from my first baby, and there was a design lead in the role that I was in before, which was disappointing and hard, but make sense. So I was trying to think of like, well, what do I want to do next? So instead of kind of sitting and disappointed or being demotivated, using it as an opportunity to think like, what's the next challenge I want to take on? And so there was an opportunity where I was looking at the different teams, what's open, and there was a design lead role on the design systems team, and that really interested me because my experience with marketing and brand, and also I like to be really technical as well, and so really interesting there. So I jumped at the opportunity and decided, let's try this. Let's be a design lead and take on some direct reports and lead part of the design system. And yeah, from there, it was history. I just love it. I fell in love with it, and it brings me so much joy to see a team do their best work, feel super fulfilled, and see the tangible impact that I can have by leading or creating the right environment to create exponential value for the business, see the users love our product, and see business value go up. All things I really enjoy. So I ended up sticking with it. But when I started out, I was really just trying it.
And what do you find to be some of the more challenging parts of becoming a design manager?
Yeah, so I think one is really was learning to manage my energy. I actually worked with a coach on this one. I think, I am a mom of three kids, and also being a design leader and really trying to figure out how do I show up and be my best, because it ended up being pretty challenging at times to manage my energy. And so I really focused on how can I be at my best. One of those things that I realized as a part of that was I get really drained when I have a ton of one-on-ones in a row or one-on-one conversations. And as a design leader, you're having that with your direct reports. You're having that with hiring. You're having that with your partners to have strategic conversations. And so what I had to do is take a step back and really use my time to help craft how I was going to manage my energy so that I could have those one-on-ones and be really present and engaged, but also have time for deep work as well. And so in doing that, I show up my best now. But it took a while for me to figure out how to do that. So yeah, that was fairly challenging. And then also just realizing that there's a different challenge at each stage of being a design leader. So when I first started out, it was really challenging going from peer to manager. I think, a lot of people don't talk about that. I didn't really think about that. But it's kind of like I joined into management, and then suddenly like, people didn't necessarily want to like have me for lunch. And it was like, oh, because the relationship has to be a little bit different, right? It's like, you can't be friends. And I think it can be a difficult transition if you were friends with your peers and now you're a manager. It's not that they don't want to hang out with you. It's not that they don't want to be your friend, but it's a different relationship. There's a power dynamic that's been introduced, and you just have to recognize that. And I think you have to take a step back and think about how those relationships change so that you can continue to have those relationships with those people, and do your job really well and help them be set up for success. So that was really challenging. And then from there, like when you move into director, your first team kind of changes. Like you were really focused on your direct reports and your team and focusing on them. And then now your peers kind of become your other design leaders and your other design directors. You're spending way more time with them to make sure you're setting your team up for success. And so one of the challenges was just learning at each level, like, oh, there's something new that I have to learn. And sometimes you can't really prepare for it until you're there, but you can prepare for it in your soft skills, in your adaptability, being able to learn, and then when you show up, you work with your peers to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I remember back, one of the biggest challenges that I had was, and this may be because I'm an only child, but when I became a design manager, I had this challenge, like with just the different types of personalities that I was working with, and understanding how, different personality types have different needs and different ways of working and different levels of expressiveness. And I really had to focus on tailoring my way of like coming across and my communication, and really empathize with the folks on my team.
Yeah.
And I found, interestingly, reading this book on the Enneagram, which is about personality types, sort of derived from Carl Jung's personality types. It can be a little bit esoteric, but it's oftentimes used by many companies. It just describes a number of different types of personalities, and it helped me kind of build up these archetypes in my head. And then I wouldn't actually ask people like, what personality type are you? But I would at least be able to recognize different indications and use that as an additional level of almost like a decoder ring to like modulate my, my way of working with different folks.
Yeah.
But that took that was hard, and now it's sort of like second nature to a certain degree. But when I first started out, that was probably one of the biggest challenges that I had.
Yeah. And it's challenging because just as individual contributors are growing and learning at each level, in leadership, because there's tons of leadership involved in IC track as well. Managers are as well, but you're also like leading people and working on yourself. And that could be really challenging to balance because you have to give yourself grace. Hopefully your team can help give you grace too, so that as you're learning and growing, they're coming along with you and you're bringing them along too. So yeah, that's really interesting because even giving challenging feedback and constructive feedback, people want it different ways. And it only works in different ways. Or if they're excelling, how do you motivate someone? They get motivated in such different ways. So yeah, I love that. And managing individuals is definitely a key part of growing in leadership.
And along your path of management, did you learn from specific people who were coaching you? Did you take courses that might have been offered? Did you read books? Is it a combination of all three? Like, what was your path?
A combination. I read Radical Candor. I think Kim Scott. I love that book. I read Herding Tigers, herding tigers. It's about managing creative people and ego. Because come on, there's a lot of ego in the creative field at times. So really interesting book. Listening to podcasts and just having amazing mentors as well, and people who advocated for me and coached me, especially if as I try to discover my leadership style and what was authentic to me, having people who know you, who are ahead of you, or 5 years, 10 years ahead of you, can really help you see things about yourself that you can't see, and help hone in to be a better version of yourself instead of just being a better version of someone else. So I also took something called like the Berkman test, a little bit kind of like maybe there's the Enneagram type of stuff too. And the Berkman test is really about what environment I work best in. So like, what am I motivated by and what environment would be the best for me? Because a lot of times, like there might be a role and it feels like it's not working for you, and you feel like maybe you're even getting constructive feedback and you're like, I feel like I'm doing really great work. I don't know what's happening. Sometimes like when it's not a good fit, it's not about that person and their abilities. It's just about the soil that they're in and the environment that they're in. You have to have the right environment to flourish sometimes. And so I always try to open up that conversation to people too. It's like when we're giving feedback and something's not working, let's be open to talking about, is it the right place or even time? Is it the right size of company? Is it the right, leadership style at the company? Or is it the right product that you're working on? Are you motivated by it or not? Because when you're demotivated, it's kind of hard to hide that at times. And I think there's usually things in the company or another company that can help connect you to your values and really motivate you. And so lots of different things, books, podcasts, everything.
That's great. Yeah, two books that I love to kind of read together on management are High Output Management. It's sort of like by Andy Grove, which was the former CEO of Intel. And it's basically like where OKRs started. And it's like very technical and it's really, really interesting and good. And I like to couple that with Creativity Inc., which is the book on Quasar's creativity, which is like, it's a completely different way of like managing the creative process. So I love to couple those. There's another one, was it five something of a team?
Dysfunction?
Five dysfunction of a team.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. It kind of has the archetypes, like you said. It kind of
totally. Yeah, but it tells it in like a story form. So it's kind of fun to read. And then another one, when I was at Google, they had a whole track that was on something called adaptive leadership philosophy. And that's something that I've really taken with me throughout my entire career. It's really thinking about organizations like organisms. And when you're running experiments as a leader, you sort of think about like, well, what part of this organism do I want to isolate and run an experiment on? And can I change that? And then you like go through a process of talking about the experiment you want to run so people know that you're running an experiment. You run it within the company and you understand your zone of like influence, what you can impact within that experiment. And then at the end of the experiment, you basically say, okay, like this is what we discovered. Does it make sense to change this part of the organism? Or like, that wasn't a good experiment. Let's keep it and let's move to the next one. but it helps you kind of like think of the organization as this adaptive thing that you're constantly changing over time.
Yeah.
Google always does a ton of reorgs. They are like constantly changing themselves as an organization, and it's like adaptive philosophy is part of that. So there's a book called Leadership on the Line, which is one of my favorites. Okay, so getting back to your career, so you've evolved, from, intern to IC to manager to director, and now you're head of design at Calendly. I'd love to just understand, like, what does that role look like as head of design of a very successful, what would you say, medium-sized sort of startup?
Medium size, 500?
Yeah.
500 people? I think so, yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because it's a similar size as when I joined LinkedIn as an intern, but joining as the head of design. So it's really interesting to be in this a similar place of growth and scale and excitement, but in a totally different role. So I'm learning a lot and drawing on my perspective too that I had before to bring in, like, what was it like when I was joining a place like this versus what is it like when I'm leading a place like this. So the role. So I mean, as head of design, I think what I really focus on is how do I drive clarity and impact. And really, like, whatever I need to do for my organization to provide clarity for my team and drive impact for my team, for the business, for users, is what I look at every day. So I try to think about, like, what are the priorities that are a part of that and how am I driving those priorities forward. And so I like to think about it as like a wheel. Like, if I can drive value for the users, that drives value for the business, which in turn drives value for my team. And then the individuals on the team are super motivated to drive value for our users, coming up with new products and new ways of working, new interaction models. And so that's really what I try to drive. I drive clarity, impact around that cycle in a positive way, and see exponential impact from having that move in that direction.
Very interesting. How do you think about value? Like, where does that come from? Is it just like building something that's useful and usable for folks, or like how do you go beyond just like the basics?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I mean, that's the big question in our industry, I think, is like, how do we set up our teams to be in that mindset? I mean, I think it's, understand having really clear goals as a company, having
Hmm.
really clear goals as a company and a few of them, having really clear goals as a company, having a few of them, and then hiring the best people and giving them the autonomy. You hired them for that, giving them the autonomy to say, here's what I think will drive value in these areas. And so you do have some tops down guidance based on, context and the industry and like what we're trying to do, making sure that we're driving in the right direction that our company wants to be in and that we're not ending up in a bunch of different places. But then giving autonomy to the people to say, how do you think value, will come from this? And having that comes from whether it's processes, whether it's product features, whether it's a visual refresh, whatever people are talking about, how we work together. Really, I think it's about bringing the people in and then giving them autonomy to say, here's an idea and here's how it connects to that. And that goes back to what I was talking about aligning to business impact. If you're an individual who's paying attention and then you're proactively proposing that stuff, not only is it amazing for you and your career and you're going to experience really great things, but the users and your business also drive a ton of value for that, because that's why they hired you. They wanted you here to be contributing that. So yeah, that's how I think about it.
That's great. It's kind of a system where you have like from the top, you have the strategy and the guidance, then you have the focus and like helping people like really understand what the primary objectives are. And then if you have hired the right people who are then able to understand the business and like are constantly seeking feedback and are like, individually improving, then you can give them a lot of autonomy and they have the authority to make their own decisions and then connect that back
Yes.
to strategy.
Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question, which is kind of also one that's a prioritization question. So you've got a ton of stuff that's going on. You've got 3 kids. How do you make time to decide where to focus?
Yes. I have a notebook. I'm a physical notebook person. I know that not a lot of people are anymore, but I have a physical notebook. I have a lot of check boxes. And I think about my time in weeks. I mean, time is such a precious resource. And I think about my time in weeks. So I look at people, product, process, what are the things that I need to get done? What are the top 3 priorities this week if I couldn't do anything else? Because in our roles, things come up all the time. You cannot plan your week on Monday. It doesn't work that way. But on Monday, I could say, here's the 3 things that I really need to get done, the priorities, looking at people, product, process, and then everything else fits in around that. And I do like to think about my time in weeks, because if you think about it in days, you really can't accomplish a lot in a day. There's so much going on. You really have to think about it in weeks so that you can have that rhythm of work, and you understand what am I accomplishing? What are the goals? And then you see really tangible progress week by week. If I think that way. And yes, I have three kids at home. And so, trying to say, I'm going to have quality time with each one of them today. It's impossible. It's impossible. And as a working mother, trying to do that at home and trying to do that at work. But I think, can I have quality time with each of them this week? Yes, totally. And that's doable, and it's amazing. And that's success for me. And so I really plan out my time in weeks at work and at home.
Very cool. I just want to underscore this for everybody. The art of setting goals and planning your time is one that is so critical. And I feel like it's such a key to unlock success. It's part of that preparation, and then there's the luck. But when you're doing preparation and when you're thinking about your career planning is doing that on a very long-term scale. And when you back up all the way down to the next week, if you've got that long-term plan and you back up to the week, then you're, okay, what am I doing this week? There's a strategy behind it all. And it doesn't always come easy to folks, but, making sure you've got clear goals that you've set, priorities, and then having that week-long set of plans I think that's a great way to go about it. Yes. Okay, so that is our time for questions that I'm asking. Now let's turn to Q&A from the audience. So let's see what we have. Okay.
All right. The first question, the first question we have from Shweta is also about setting goals. Her question is, what goals have you set for your design team?
Okay, and I know, Ethan, we can both answer these questions too. They don't have to be just for me. What goals have I set for my team? First, I have to think about what goals I could talk about. I think in general, when I think about the goals for the team, it's really similar to the people, product, process part of it. And so one of them is product quality. So when we think about product quality, how do we define that? And so one thing that the team and I are working on actually cross-functionally is what does it mean? What does product quality mean to us as a company and as a team? And not only us as a design team, but working with our product, engineering, customer experience teams, marketing teams, so that we all have agreed upon definition of what does product quality mean to us. That way, when we're getting into every conversation for trade-offs, what we're going to prioritize, we have that to look to say, is this actually meeting what we think quality product is? What is that bar? And if we're not able to meet it, because we all know the reality of working in a business and timelines of what we're doing, if we can't meet that bar, at least we're having a tangible, real conversation about what those trade-offs are. And we're not really mystifying it or kind of letting them go to the side and not speaking to them. So that's one of the goals that we have as a team that we're working on right now.
Cool. From the Slack side, the goals that I have for the team are typically year-long goals, and we have goals around diversity within the team. What is the composition of the team, and are we actually practicing inclusive practices in the team, and are we building up an organization that is as diverse as it possibly can be? Along with that, we look at L&D and how are people developing within the organization, and how can we bring in programs and create opportunities so that people are able to sort of get to the next step in their careers. We also look at how we share the story of Slack, both internally and externally, because that's part of our retention and recruiting process. And so we put some investment and energy into that. And then similar to what Jess described, we do have product-oriented goals, but the way that we work at Slack is we have different pillars, primary areas of the business. And so the pillar leads align with those areas of the business, and they've got their own sub-goals. at the design team level, what we're looking at is sort of the general conversation around product quality. And then in some cases, in certain times, we will have a conversation about product innovation, how we can actually push the product forward. Even though in the pillar teams, we do a pretty good job of innovating, we have to bring it all together in a centralized way. And so we are talking about, so for the product quality side, there was this great article that was recently written called The World's Most Satisfying Checkbox. It was about just how to bring a level of like feeling and emotion and game-like experience into product. And so we've used that as sort of a North Star. We've started conversations. We've added some design engineers to the team, some motion designers to the team. And, recently we just launched Huddles 2.0, which has like animated reactions and like the UI kind of animates. And we've got great background artwork and great custom audio that we built. All of that is really meant to like increase the level of feel in the software, because software should feel humanistic. But we got there because we had started a conversation earlier on about feeling and quality in the product. So we planted the seed. We then added people to the team to be able to accomplish this. And then we had this great team working on Huddles that was able to really pull it off and ship it to market. So that's the other big goal that we have, to do a lot more of that. So that's kind of the TLDR and our goals.
And I think what you said there, Ethan, is really good, where it's like you have to have a goal, and then you have to hire against that goal and resource it to be effective. And then also find a project that's already happening and that maps to the business to be able to ship that goal that you have. So I think that's a really great learning there too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Any other questions?
Yes. I think we have time perhaps for one more question. And I'd like to showcase this one. How do you identify a mentor that will best help you grow in your career? I guess it's especially relevant in the leadership role.
Yeah, I think one way is to find someone. We can't imitate anyone because we're all our own people, and you have to show up as yourself, learn about yourself and how you show up with your own values. However, I think that there are, a cohort of people that can reflect where you want to go. And so finding something specific, it's always great to have something specific that you're working on with your mentor. Sometimes when you're doing something generic, things can get lost, and it can be hard to be motivated and drive towards that real change that you want to see in yourself. So figuring out first, what do you want to do? What do you want to grow in? What do you want that to look like? And then finding the person that has that and does that really well. And then having them help you grow in that area in your career.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also add something that is maybe a bit counterintuitive, but as designers, we're constantly observing the way that things work. And I think part of the hallmark of being a designer is that we're very aware of like the environment, of people's humanistic cues, like the built environment. Like we tend to be very aware, and so you can learn from everybody around you. And if you are looking at that next stage in your career, you can get a mentor who's doing exactly that next thing and learn from them, or you can just observe people who are doing that next thing as well. And what I've found when I've done that in my career is that it's very rare that I will center on somebody who like checks 100% of all the boxes. There may be, they may like, have an exemplary way of like presenting to executives, but on the flip side, like I'll just give an example, like they tend to make maybe sarcastic comments about their team. And so, I'm like, my personal values are like optimism, and I really can't stand cynicism. So if I were to see that person, I'd say, okay, they do this one thing really well. I want to learn about that. But there's this other thing they do that actually conflicts with my personal values. And so let me really feel what it's like when they provide this cynical feedback and internalize that and know that if I'm in their position, I won't do that. So this is the counterintuitive thing. I've learned almost as much about leadership from the anti-patterns that I've encountered in my career.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
And it's just being observant about what, like, who you are, what your values are, and having strong values, and then being able to use those values as a sounding board when you experience these anti-patterns, and being able to really register like, wow, that made me feel not great, or that made me feel kind of strange. When I'm in that position, I won't do that. Like it's actually a really helpful and instructive thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jess and Ethan. I'm afraid we are a little bit short on time, so we can't take all the questions in the Q&A. There are so many of them. But thank you so much for talking to everybody about design leadership, and we hope to bring you guys back again to some of the future events. And guys, there are other events. There are other sessions as well for BeMore Festival. Do check them out. Have lots of fun. I'll see you around.
Thanks.
Thank
See you,
you.
Jess. It was fun.
See you, Ethan.
Ciao.